Ladies and gentlemen, the prophecy has finally come to pass. In an age-long past, two mascot gaming gods were at war, a plumber and a hedgehog. In an effort to surpass the other, their conflict left behind a nearly endless assortment of saucy and exciting games that were fun from beginning to end for casual gamers and hardcore gamers alike, and the gaming mascots were in perfect balance. But one day, the hedgehog fell, and with no one left to challenge him, the plumber slowly began to grow complacent, charging exorbitant prices for re-releases and games that were inferior to their much more affordable predecessors. The games were still fun, but the fun was fading. The world of casually accessible games that could also be enjoyed by hardcore gamers was fading into darkness. However, a prophecy was foretold that the hedgehog would one day rise from the ashes and release a game that would restore balance to the casual gaming industry. That game has finally come in the unassuming form of a kart racer. The game? Sonic Racing CrossWorlds.
Oh my god, look at the tricks and the fire and the dragon. Fuck! I got a 4680, oh my god! Look at this, get the fuck out my fucking way, hell yeah! Fuck yeah! Fuck you, Jet! They got Hatsune Miku and Extreme Gear and Metal Harbor! Ah! Let's fucking go! Oh my god, fucking White Cave! Fuck! This game is so good!
Excuse me. So, now that the proverbial Sonic Racing CrossWorlds nut has been busted, what does this have to do with the 90s Mario and Sonic rivalry? And why is this not only good for Sonic fans, but Mario and Nintendo fans as well? Put simply, Nintendo has gotten too comfortable in recent years. Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft have all sort of carved out their niches in the gaming industry at this point, and there's little need for them to compete directly. While Xbox struggled this generation, PC gaming is stronger than ever, which usually happens on a Windows computer. Sony holds a dominant position with hardcore gamers who prefer to play on console, and Nintendo is casual gamers as well as hardcore gamers looking for a portable option. So, Microsoft has the gamer's office, Sony has the gamer's living room, and Nintendo has the gamer's backpack. Now, you might be asking, but Blue, Steam Decks exist, and mobile. How does Nintendo have such a stranglehold on portable gaming when gamers have so many options to choose from? And yes, that might be true, but Nintendo has one thing that no competitor can replicate: their IPs. Zelda, Kirby, Pokemon, and perhaps most of all Mario are what bring people to Nintendo hardware over other options that otherwise might be more appealing. Many people, myself included, truly cannot imagine life without these franchises, and will fork over hundreds of dollars every console generation to make sure we don't miss the next big entries in these beloved franchises. This is why the Switch 2, with its whole 2 exclusive games right now, has sold over 6 million units so far, despite the constant complaints that the console and its software are overpriced. These massive sales numbers were spearheaded by Mario Kart World, the much anticipated successor to the wildly successful and much loved Mario Kart 8. This, and to a lesser degree Donkey Kong Bonanza, are really the core of Nintendo's value proposition for upgrading to the Switch 2 at this point in time. Sure, the regular Switch has all your favorite IPs, but only those who purchase a Switch 2 can play the new entry in the only kart racing series on Earth that's even worth talking about. Except, that's not the case anymore, now is it? Mario Kart World represents a major deviation from the Mario Kart formula that everyone knows and loves. Regular viewers on my channel would likely label it as a very saucy game for its attempts to turn Mario Kart into an open-world racer, but I and many others felt that the open world detracted from the fun factor overall. No one played Mario Kart 8 and thought, hey, this Grand Prix was pretty fun, but it's lacking all the high-speed thrills of interstate traffic and stopping at a gas station for a hot dog or something. And while sometimes the ideas no one asked for make for the best games, in this case, most gamers didn't feel that way. This is why Nintendo patching out a bug that enabled gamers to play more traditional 3-lap racetracks online caused a mass exodus from the servers, making it difficult to fill lobbies in a lot of cases. This is absolutely inexcusable for a Mario Kart game on hot-selling new hardware. So when word got out that Sonic Team was working on a kart racer that's more focused on fast-paced excitement and doesn't force the player to commute between tracks in a Grand Prix, the hype train really took off, and gamers were quick to point out that Mario Kart might not be the kart racer of choice anymore. A first for the series' roughly 33-year history. Sega themselves pointed out the difference between Mario Kart World and Sonic Racing CrossWorlds with an ad that replicated one of their most famous commercials from the 90s, which compared Sonic 2 to a Formula 1 race car and Super Mario Kart to an old beat-up van. Only this time, the beat-up van was a beat-up RV to poke fun at the game's road trip theme. This really stuck, as Nintendo's post about Mario Kart World started getting flooded with replies referencing the commercial. In response, Nintendo actually patched Mario Kart World to place online players in more 3-lap races than intermission tracks. Now, you might be asking how we know this was in response to the hate they were getting from Sonic Racing CrossWorlds. Well, Nintendo has never been one to react to public pressure when designing their games. Nintendo will often double down on stances that the whole gaming industry disagrees with, which has put them decades behind their competition in some cases. A key example of this is online gaming. Nintendo thought gamers preferred local multiplayer and online gaming was a fad, so they didn't invest much in the technology in the GameCube or Wii generation, and continue to lag behind. I mean, we're just now getting voice chat, and they still don't have achievements. You would think that seeing the success of Xbox Live in the early 2000s would have caused Nintendo to course correct and make beefing up their online community a priority, but they stuck to their guns as long as they could. Same thing with voice acting. They just don't do it most of the time, simply because they don't feel that it adds much to the game, despite the rest of the gaming industry and internet feeling otherwise. And to their credit, sometimes their unwillingness to succumb to public pressure pays off. After the catastrophic failure of the Wii U, gamers were demanding they move back to developing straightforward consoles focused on performance rather than innovation. But instead, they gave us the Nintendo Switch, which wound up being one of the most successful consoles of all time. My point in saying all of this is that it's highly unusual for Nintendo to respond to criticism from gamers and comparisons to industry competitors. So for them to update Mario Kart World to de-emphasize the open road theming they were obviously very proud of and confident in, right when a competing kart racer is released, indicates that they are feeling very threatened by Sonic Racing CrossWorlds. And I can't say I blame them. The heart of their pitch for the Switch 2 has been Mario Kart World. It's one of only 2 exclusive games on the market for the console. Why would anyone buy a Switch 2 if they can play an even better kart racer on a console they already own? The last time we saw Nintendo in a position like this was the early 90s, when Sonic 1 and Super Mario World were going toe-to-toe. The Sega Genesis was cheaper, and many gamers felt like Mario was old news compared to the faster and cooler Sonic the Hedgehog. For that reason, the Sega Genesis actually outsold the Super Nintendo for a time, which was something almost no one would have predicted when looking at the prior console generation. Nintendo had almost no meaningful competition in the 8-bit era. This competition really put a fire under Nintendo's ass to convince the public that the Super Nintendo's higher price tag was worth it, and Sega was not about to surrender their newly found market share without a fight. Nintendo, with the help of other collaborators, got to work developing specialized chips to enable their games to feature more impressive graphics, and bought a controlling share of Rareware to pioneer pre-rendered graphics with Donkey Kong Country in hopes of developing games with more wow factor than Sonic. Meanwhile, Sega found creative methods to replicate the Super Nintendo's scaling effects, and worked to develop add-ons to one-up the SNES in terms of performance. These were, of course, the Sega CD and the Sega 32X. And, of course, both developers put out an innumerable amount of absolutely amazing games. Both the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis are easily some of the best consoles ever made. And while there's no way to know for sure what would have happened if Nintendo held their monopoly throughout the 16-bit era, it's hard to imagine this generation would have been the same in that situation. Hell, Nintendo didn't even want to make the SNES until rival hardware began to appear. They were planning to just sell the regular old NES forever. Now, this isn't to say Nintendo hasn't faced competition since then. Far from it, actually. They got absolutely wrecked by Sony in the following generation, and it only got worse in the GameCube era. But in these console generations, we saw Nintendo acting markedly different from the Super Nintendo era, and more how we would typically expect them to operate today. Bear with me here, I promise this is going to come back to Sonic Racing CrossWorlds and Mario Kart World. So, in the 5th generation of consoles, they grossly underestimated the PlayStation and stuck with cartridges over CDs, despite the rest of the industry moving in that direction. They felt cartridges were the right choice and refused to be pressured into conforming to the current industry standard. This actually resulted in many developers abandoning Nintendo in favor of Sony to take advantage of the additional storage space. And even then, they didn't learn. In the following generation, they chose to use proprietary mini DVDs that had less storage than the industry standard DVDs, despite everyone and their mother telling them that they would be absolutely fucking brain dead if they allowed themselves to be limited by storage space again. When HD consoles appeared, Nintendo wasn't even interested in the technology and instead developed the Wii around motion controls. This actually did pay off, as the Wii sold like hotcakes initially, but sales slumped later in the console's life as gaming outgrew what the Wii was capable of. When it came time to develop the Wii's successor, all gamers wanted was for them to not fuck it up. Motion controls are dead. Please make a significant, straightforward console again. So, naturally, their plan for the 8th generation of home consoles was to make a 7th generation console that needs some big-ass iPad to work. This went about as well as you would expect it to, and it wasn't long before Nintendo announced they were developing new hardware. As you can imagine, Nintendo fans were begging for something simple. I remember talking with classmates in high school on a near daily basis about how much we just wanted Nintendo to go back to making plastic boxes that sit under your TV and play games well, and that's it. Fuck you, have a Nintendo Switch. Wait, this is pretty cool actually, take all my money. So, what's the point of this history lesson exactly? Well, the key difference here is something in the 16-bit generation forced Nintendo to react rather than stick their heads in the sand. Now, typically, it's a bad sign for a business to be labeled as a reactor rather than an innovator or a business that simply seeks to defend their current position in the market. We can actually use Sega as an example of what happens when you simply react to what your competition is doing. NEC makes a CD add-on, so we need a CD add-on. Atari made the big scary Jaguar, so we need the 32X. PlayStation can do 3D better than the console we're about to release, so let's just throw a bunch of shit into the Saturn super last minute, so perhaps a team of the greatest scientific minds on Earth might be able to get comparable 3D graphics out of it. Never mind that it's going to cost a bajillion fucking dollars if we do that. You don't want to be left behind, do you? By the time they figured out they needed to analyze their competition and use second move advantage to improve upon what works, eliminate what doesn't, and add some innovative ideas too, rather than just blindly reacting to industry hype, it was too late, and the Dreamcast died, ending their tenure in the home console market. This balance of analysis and innovation is what Nintendo needs to get back to. In the 16-bit era, Nintendo was watching their competitors closely. When they saw the Sega CD came out, Nintendo didn't rush anything out the door, but they continued working on their own CD add-on. When the Sega CD flopped, they knew that that was not the move and abandoned their SNES CD project, to instead focus on squeezing more out of the base SNES. When they saw Sega of America's marketing team was having success calling Nintendo out directly, they took notice, but didn't stoop to their level. Instead, they saved the shade throwing for when it was really, really earned, like in this ad for Donkey Kong Country, for example. For the most part, they played to their strengths rather than their opponents' weaknesses, and ultimately came out on top that generation, so that was probably the right move. When they saw games with more adult themes were becoming popular, they waited for Sega to catch the brunt of the controversy. When it became clear that the best defense was to simply publish the age recommendations on the box, they loosened their policies for what games could appear on their hardware. And when they had a good idea, they innovated, like with Mario Paint and the SNES mouse, for example, which Sega made the mistake of blindly reacting to, like everything else. After Donkey Kong Country came out and sadly mopped the floor with Sonic 3 in terms of sale and buzz at the time, things started to change with Nintendo. They went from analyzing their competition and picking and choosing what trends to follow to just ignoring their competition altogether. CDs were cheaper to produce and were a much better fit for RPGs, which had been a huge selling point for the SNES. By making this choice to use cartridges, they not only allowed the PlayStation to be the more affordable option in the long run, but they lost an entire segment of their audience to the PlayStation all at once. But who cares? We're Nintendo. If you want to play the best platformer on the market, you'll get a Nintendo 64, even if you end up spending a fortune on games. What, are you going to play Crash Bandicoot instead? What a sad compromise. GameCube was more of the same. Does it play DVDs? Nah. Does it have any good third-party support? Nope. But it's a Nintendo console, meaning you get our IPs. Can't miss that. What platformer could the PS2 or Xbox offer that could possibly compete with Mario? What adventure game could they offer that would be anything other than a compromise when compared to Zelda? Are you really going to take the L on that? You see where I'm going with this. As long as Nintendo is known for being best in class in the genres they focus on, they'll have built-in appeal, even if there's nothing else appealing about their hardware. But the thing that rattles them, the thing that really makes them actually give a shit, is when a game comes along that makes gamers ask, is Nintendo really the best at what they do? Sonic Racing CrossWorlds is the first game in a long time to do that, if you ask me. You can compare it to Mario Kart World apples to apples, and still many people are saying Sega made the better game here. Not only this, but Sega has made it clear they intend to start competing with Nintendo and Mario again. This is great news because it shows that they're setting high goals for themselves. And with Shadow Gens and CrossWorlds, they've shown that they're more than capable of making games on par with their outings in the Genesis era. With this in mind, I'm expecting the next mainline Sonic game to one-up Donkey Kong Bonanza the way that CrossWorlds one-up Mario Kart World. After all, they have that highly important second move advantage. And if Nintendo is smart, they'll recognize this possibility and either give Donkey Kong a massive update with tons of new content and mechanics, or get to work on an absolutely legendary Mario game to compete. If you couldn't tell, I love both Sega and Nintendo, but I'm definitely a bigger Sonic fan than I am a Mario fan. However, those who feel differently should actually be quite excited about Sonic Racing CrossWorlds, because that age-old competition that we thought had ended long ago is finally back. And I believe it's going to bring out the best of these gaming giants and usher in some of the best games ever made.